Hey, this is Christian Buckley with another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here with Melissa. Good morning.
Good morning, Christian. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. And for folks that don't know you, that aren't familiar with it, why don't you introduce yourself, where you are, who you are, what you do, all those kinds of things.
Sure. My name's Melissa Hubbard, and I'm coming to you this morning from the Washington, D.C. area in Virginia. I am a consultant with a company called Withum Digital, and I am an avid blogger and speaker, Microsoft MVP in the business applications and office apps and services category.
Dual MVP, it's important to
Yes, I'm still trying to get that second one right when I introduce myself.
Melissa, just say it's like I'm an MVP with distinction.
It's a mouthy thing there, the whole category thing. Okay, so I speak on Flow and Microsoft Teams quite often. Those are two of my topics I'm passionate about, and I've been using these tools pretty much from the beginning when they were first released, and have watched them grow and have helped my customers grow with these tools. Business process automations and really just digital workplace and productivity are topics I like to talk about and I'm passionate about with my customers. I think that sums it up.
Well, so here's a great question that I hear constantly from the community, so I'd like to get your take on it. So how do you as an MVP, how do you keep up with all of the announcements? I mean, just Teams alone, there just seems to be every week that there's more and more coming out being discussed around it. So what do you do to kind of keep up on what's happening in the community and from the product?
I mean, I have to say I do my best, but I can't always say I'm totally up to date on everything. I don't know who could be on everything. It's very difficult, but to stay on top of things as best as I can, especially, I'm really heavily focused in two products that change rapidly. Flow and Teams both are constantly growing and changing. I definitely utilize social media quite a bit and read other amazing community members' blog posts. I watch in Office 365 when something is released. I communicate with my Withum Digital team very frequently when we're seeing new things with our customers. We have some customers who are in GCC tenants as well, so we try to follow that as best we can. It's really working together and being on Twitter, watching all the announcements from different product team members. It's difficult.
You know, there's on the GCC too. I mean, so Melissa just did a webinar with us with the Utah user group here, and on Flow, and there were a couple questions that were around GCC. I mean, your experience working in the public sector, do you see that environment, like, is it keeping up with the changes, the pace, or is it still very slow, or has Microsoft even gotten better within that space in kind of keeping up with the feature set?
It seems like it's definitely still behind. I'm hoping that I think the hope is that those will start being released at the same time. There'll be more parity in the future releases, but there's definitely still a lag. And partly, I mean, that's, to me, is expected, knowing that the reason you have GCC tenants is because there's a lot of different security and compliance things that need to be met. And some features just won't be able to be in GCC because they won't meet requirements for the different security and government things, policies.
Right. And I think it's probably I mean, I think you're right. I think the goal obviously is to have as much parity as possible, but like with any, and there are a number of other, tenants. I mean, the German marketplace is a great example of that, where they have certain requirements in region that are different than other countries that can't just sign on with Office 365, all up, the global, imprint of that. They have varying requirements and differences in standards and what they require from those systems. GCC is just like that. It's just like another country, another entity that just has to go through that checklist. So,
yeah, And with Teams, I don't see any major features that to me would make the tool just unusable or not beneficial. I mean, I feel like the main features, using channels, having conversations, storing your files, being able to work together in one place, replacing a lot of group emails into Teams, like that, those main great things are there. You know, it's just some of the extras. What in my mind I see as, well, you know, but for some organizations these are definite requirements, but for the most part, I feel like the government can get the main thrills from Teams.
Sure. I think that the biggest thing was the data residency, you know, and being able to decide no matter where you are, to be able to say, hey, look, here it makes sense for us to be operating out of the, you know, out of this environment, but from our data requirements, you know, this organization that's in this country must have their data residency in this location. Other teams they may or may not interact with can be over out of these locations. That may then, for a, you know, a multi-geo organization that has varying, depending on where their teams are located, data residency requirements or security requirements could then impact, you know, the features that they see. But again, Microsoft has been doing a lot to try to meet those requirements for organizations.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, so let me ask you, so what is, talking about features, and we talked about this before we got started, is like, but what are you most excited about or greatly anticipating what's happening within the team space?
Well, one of Christian and I's favorite topics to talk about when we find each other at events and things is private channels. I think it was this is private channels for Microsoft Teams, in case you don't know that, but I think the last time we talked about it was your CollabTalk. There was, I don't know if that,
yeah, we did a tweet jam specifically around this, like our private channels, I don't remember the title, are private channels needed or necessary?
Yeah, I was really hyped up for that. And then we had team private channels, team no private channels, hashtags going.
Which we then started evolving into, I think you started it, was Team Edward versus.
Yeah, we did.
Right.
We went there with our Twilight hashtags.
So I think anti-private channel was Team Jacob. And at the time I was Team Jacob personally.
Yeah. Yeah, you were. We were opposed. We were opposing each other on this one, and so it just so happens that right before I'm meeting with Christian to do this interview, it's been announced that, well, it keeps being announced that they're coming, that private channels are coming. I think it's been announced several times that they're coming, but we were able to see a date of September. They were going to begin rolling out private channels. So a lot of excitement there, and that would be pre-Ignite too. So
yeah. I think they maybe want to get some of that initial feedback before going into those sessions, so they can fine-tune their messaging and sessions information. But let me just say, so of course, being an MVP, you have deep insight into the architecture of that product, of that feature.
No, I can't say that I do. I wish I did. I've tried hard to get it, but it seems that we will all be surprised, and we will all see it at the same time, and that'll be exciting. One thing I would hope is that it could be turned off at the tenant level. I think there's going to be some organizations who just don't need it, and therefore just shouldn't open that can of worms.
Well, maybe we start with, Melissa, why don't you describe kind of what it is, the idea of the private channels and why they're needed, and then I can then speak out against it.
Oh, sure. That sounds like a great idea. So in Microsoft Teams, you have your teams. So from an IA perspective, you are setting your access at your team level for now. And every team you get your SharePoint site collection, and from there, you create channels underneath to organize your content and keep your conversations separated, keep your files. They're really all in the same document library, but kind of separating them out in in channels that are folders in
Folders, that's right, folders.
Yes, they're in folders, but you don't see the folder. It doesn't feel like a folder. And I know we're all also waiting for more parity with the SharePoint SharePoint list and library features to come to that files tab too, where we can start adding more and more organization things for our documents and our list.
Sure.
But anyway, I think it was definitely the most requested feature for Microsoft Teams was to be able to make some of your channels private, meaning you add a channel in a team, but you only want certain team members to be able to see the content. So basically adding a more complex permission structure and then having to manage, these are open channels in my team, these are private channels, kind of when we think about SharePoint permissions management, breaking your inheritance in a SharePoint site, and then setting your permissions at lower levels.
Well, and one great way to kind of define like the problem area is if you have external users inside a team. So right now, it's the permissions, as you mentioned, are at that team level, so that if I want to invite, if I've got 10 channels within a team, and I want to invite external people in just to collaborate around one of the channels that is relevant to this partner, they actually will, once I let them in, can see all of the channels, all of those discussions. Obviously, you can still control who has permissions within like SharePoint team sites that are added in, after the fact, but they by default have access to anything within the team that they have, that have access into. And so the idea of that private channel is like, well, I can go in there and make all of the teams private except for the general channel, and that's the only one that I want these external users to come in and be able to have participate in the conversation and have access to, so they can get to all those assets. They're part of that team, and so they can be part of the reporting and visibility to whatever they're given control of. But then they don't have access to those, let's say, the financial information around the project, which is in managed by one channel. But likewise, I don't want everybody in my organization to see the financial information, just myself, the leadership team, the accounting, finance team. And so you can have that end-level permissions management over your teams. So that's the argument in favor of.
Right, because yes, you could create another team to do this, and then invite the people that you want there to see that content. But the real value that I see in Teams, one of the main things I see that provides so much value, is that it keeps everything in context. So if you have your one project that, you have your team, and then you've got your whatever training documents, and you've got your project management schedules and documentation, and then you've got your financials. Do you really want that separated into a totally different team and SharePoint site collection just so that you can keep people out of it? I mean, there is a huge use case, but then also thinking about it's going to become it has to become more complex to manage teams like this. I mean, I do a session, I'm doing it in SharePoint Fest Seattle, and it's called Being a Super Team Owner. And it really focuses on being a team owner and how you really need to know the different settings you have access to, and helping you drive user adoption, ways you can really help with that. And I'm thinking about team owners, that's going to be a big responsibility for them if that's how it turns out, that team owners are, I would imagine, responsible for creating private channels and managing the permissions of those, since they're the ones who manage access now. And also to think about the fact that by default, everyone can create a team and then can create a bunch of private channels. So
well, that's why it'll be, obviously the proof is in pudding. We'll have to see what that architecture of the solution, what's actually deployed.
Yeah.
How it works, how it functions, how much they've thought about and are managing, like the provisioning process, the permissions process. There's a lot of the other backend admin reporting capability, like, what happens to visibility. So in theory, I can be the team creator. Do I have control over who creates a private channel? I may give people access, to other owners within that, but then can I be locked out of the team that I created, or do I still have access and visibility to that? So there's some issues there. Well, so here, part of my argument is that, today, let's go back to my scenario, where I've created a team, you've invited external folks into that. Part of my argument is that, well, you have the ability, if you really need to have a separate location to go and manage, internal only, the private content, is to go and create a standalone SharePoint team site or subsite of that, whatever you want to define that, over in SharePoint. Only invite the accounting team, the finance, the leadership team into that, and then add that team site as a folder within files, add it as a tab within that team's workspace. There you then have that private. Now, I understand that the argument is like, well, but you don't have the conversation thread, the other aspects that are team. So if you guys want to get in there,
got a workaround.
Right. There are other workarounds. There are also private groups within Yammer that can be added as a tab, and you could have a Yammer group created for that rare conversation around those private activities. So my argument, being a Team Jacob person, was that you have some methods today to go and share that. Of course, you also have OneDrive, and so depending on what it is, if it's not a ton of assets, it's just a few different assets, where you can again create a private invite only, you as the team owner, and have that location, then share that out. And you can share that as a tab, and only those people who have access, they click on the tab. If you don't have the right permissions, you don't see any of that data. So what's wrong with that idea of what we can do today out of the box?
I don't know. Again, it takes things out of context, and I feel like it complicates things for the end users, whereas probably having private channels is going to complicate things for more of like your
admin
IT manager. Yeah, but I feel like that complicates it more for end users, and I'd rather the end users have things less complicated.
I agree, and which is why I've come over to the side of Team Edward since that tweet jam.
Oh my goodness!
I was never fully over. Like, I understand it. I think even back then, as like when they first started talking about this, I mean, my apprehension was always in, how are you going to architect this and deploy it, and then will there be the proper support mechanisms? It's kind of, here's a great way I like to compare. So, when they go and you're working in a city, in a region that's growing rapidly, and they're building houses and neighborhoods, and just, jumping up. And it's amazing that they don't go and build the infrastructure, the roads in and out, until after the houses are built and traffic is already a hot mess. And it's even worse, and it's slower to build out the roads connecting these new communities, because of all the increased traffic, that they should have had the forethought to go and put those pieces in place beforehand. It's rare that happens. Well, the part of the reality, and I do have a point for sharing the longer story, but part of the reality is that, but they can't afford to do all that infrastructure until they sell the houses and get the people in there to pay for the infrastructure build. So it's kind of a trade-off of those things. But in some ways, like we have to see the capability, and it might be messier, it might be more painful on the admin, on the development side, the permissions management side early on, but Microsoft will catch up with the infrastructure, with the connections to go and enable those things. We know that's going to happen. It just, how painful is it going to be on the back end? That's going to be the question.
That's a great analogy. And at the end of the day, I just hope everyone can keep using Teams and getting their work done, and that for end users, this change will be pretty seamless. You know, it's all we can hope for. Just get our work done efficiently, quickly, not have to pull our hair out wondering which tool we should use and how and which team. And hey, how much do you anticipate people needing to basically reorganize or re-architect their teams? That's what I'm wondering is going to be the impact of that. Because there is no way right now that I know of. Maybe there's some third-party tools that I haven't heard of yet that can easily migrate channels, or I didn't think
not that I'm aware of. That's a great point, and I think you're right. I think that because if in today's architecture, if I've got a team for internal only and a duplicate or a sister team for external users, and there's not really been a way to sync those two, well, now with private channels, I can have it all in one place. How do I go and retire? I have to move those assets. I mean, you can migrate the content that was created.
You can files, you mean?
Correct, the files themselves, and you can move that over into those other SharePoint environments. So there is usage of existing migration tools on the SharePoint side. Likewise, you can go in and archive those conversations, the assets that are on the Exchange workload, and move those over into SharePoint. But what you can't do is take a live discussion thread, a conversation, archive it, move it over, and then start it again. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the impact will be. I think it'll be minimally impacting users. I think for all the things that we've talked about, people will see the benefit of having them and just migrate the content over, restart the conversations.
Right, and if you archive your channel, I mean, I believe you'll be able to still search through that and still find your stuff, so it won't be gone.
No, nothing will be gone. It'll just, like I said, you can't take you can't move the state of a conversation over and then start it up again. That doesn't exist. Not that I'm aware of. Somebody feel free to correct me if there's a third-party tool that does it, but I've not seen it. So, but I agree with you. I think that it's just going to be a big plus for end users, and the rest we'll just have to see and just cross our fingers that it's a good experience for the admins.
Well, that's what people like us are here for,
That's right.
To help feel the pain and provide guidance as well as we can, and it's fun.
It is fun. Well, Melissa, hey, really appreciate your time today. And people want to find out more about you, get in touch with you. What's the best way to reach you?
I'm pretty active in social media. I use Twitter. I'm at Melly Hub. My email is mhubbard@withum.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm not very difficult to find. I also have a blog. It needs some new articles, and maybe one on private channels. I'll write a new one on private channels, maybe.
Yeah, go find that information, and we'll link to that. For sure. If you can find that info that you were talking about, what's any more on the release date and what they've been saying about it so far, that'd be great.
Yeah. So that's mellyhub.com, and speaking at a ton of conferences coming up, but I just want to give a shout out to one special one since we've been talking about Microsoft Teams. We're having our first official Microsoft Teams East Coast conference, the Modern Teamwork and Collaboration Conference, on October 4th, organized by my friends Matthew Bailey and Nakia Carter. So I'll be speaking at that one, and it's cool because it's the first one.
Focus on Teams. Yeah, I wish I could come out there. But it's good luck on that.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Christian.